Argentinian police have found what's thought to be the biggest collection of Nazi artifacts in the country's history. Take a look.
When World War II ended, most people thought the horrors of the Nazis were buried for good. But over the years, hidden bunkers, lost treasures, and forbidden weapons have surfaced, each discovery more chilling than the last. From tunnels stretching beneath mountains to cursed art and bizarre superweapons, the secrets of the Third Reich just keep coming. What else is waiting in the dark? Here are the most terrifying Nazi finds ever uncovered, and some of them are still raising questions no one dares to answer. The Wolfs Lair. Hidden deep in the haunted woods of Poland, the crumbling ruins of the Wolfs Lair might look like any overgrown military site, until you realize this was where Adolf Hitler ruled the Eastern Front, plotted invasions, and narrowly survived the most famous assassination attempt in Nazi history. Built in total secrecy, this sprawling complex included over 80 buildings, bunkers, watchtowers, even a private cinema. The site was blanketed in landmines, ringed with barbed wire, and protected by crack squads of guards. For a man obsessed with enemies, the Wolf's Lair was a concrete jungle of paranoia. But it wasn't just the defenses that made this place legendary. Beneath the mossy ground ran a labyrinth of tunnels and escape routes, crafted so that if the Soviets broke through, Hitler and his officers could vanish or even blow the place sky high. Booby traps littered the approaches, and hidden chambers waited for any would-be assassins. Even nature itself became part of the disguise. Camouflage nets, artificial trees, and the dense forest all worked to keep Allied bombers at bay. Despite all these precautions, it was in this very lair that the infamous July 20th plot unfolded. Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg's suitcase bomb blasted a meeting room, nearly changing the course of history. Hitler survived, wounded and shaken, and security around the site grew even more extreme. As the Red Army advanced in 1945, retreating Nazis packed the bunkers with explosives and destroyed what they could, leaving only shattered ruins for Soviet troops to discover. Today, visitors walk among massive slabs of blasted concrete, haunted by the sense that the war's darkest secrets may still be hiding beneath the earth. The Wolf's Lair is a grim monument to how far the Nazis would go to shield themselves from the world and from their own nightmares. The giant underground labyrinth of obsession. Beneath the jagged Owl Mountains of Poland lies a hidden world so mysterious it could have come straight from a fever dream of Nazi paranoia. This is Project Rees, or The Giant, an underground complex that's less a bunker and more an obsession. Construction started in 1943, driven by the SS and a desperate ambition to create a command center that could outlast even the collapse of Berlin. But from the start, the site was enveloped in secrecy and myth. There are barely any official blueprints, and what's left behind still keeps historians guessing. Forced labor was the grim engine of this subterranean monster. Thousands of concentration camp prisoners, many of them Jews and Soviet POWs, were forced to dig, blast, and haul through miles of rock under brutal, lethal conditions. Most would never see the sun again. The tunnels stretched for almost 9 kilometers, with chambers large enough to hide entire factories, train cars, or even stolen treasure. Some historians think the Nazis planned to build a replica of Hitler's Berlin bunker here, while others believe Riesa was intended for secret weapons research, or as a last-ditch sanctuary for the High Command. But none of these plans ever saw completion. As Soviet troops surged west, the Nazis abandoned the complex, leaving it unfinished and full of chilling traces. Armored doors, abandoned machinery, hidden railway lines, and ventilation systems built to support thousands. The silence inside those endless corridors is almost supernatural. There are rumors of hidden caches of gold, forgotten art, and even lost experiments. Visitors today are greeted with a ghostly maze, where time feels frozen and every shadow seems to whisper secrets the world still isn't ready to hear. To this day, Project Riese remains one of the most enigmatic legacies of the Third Reich, a monument to the Nazis' endless appetite for secrecy, and a chilling reminder of how far they were willing to go in pursuit of power, even as their world collapsed around them. The Ghost Train, Nazi gold on rails. If you ever doubted the power of wartime paranoia, the legend of the Nazi Ghost Train will set you straight. In the chaos of 1945, as Nazi Germany's empire collapsed, frantic officials supposedly loaded up a freight train with gold bars, priceless paintings, and crates of looted treasures. The train departed from Breslau, headed west, then, according to persistent rumors, simply vanished. Did it slip away into the mountains, sealed in a hidden tunnel? Was it dismantled, its treasures buried piece by piece across the Silesian forests? Or was it just another illusion conjured by desperate men on the run? Over the years, would-be treasure hunters have descended on Lower Silesia, shovels in hand, lured by tales of underground railways and secret passages. In 2015, two local explorers announced they'd found proof of the ghost train near Wałbrzych using radar scans. Their claim sparked a frenzy. Crowds flocked to the site, news cameras arrived, and the Polish government launched an official excavation. What did they find? Some old tracks, a lot of speculation, and layers upon layers of mystery, but no gold, no train, and no definitive answers. As for the supposed route, it runs suspiciously close to places where real Nazi vaults have been uncovered, lending just enough credibility to keep the legend alive. Yet even the skeptics will admit there's something irresistible about the idea. For locals, the story has become part of the landscape. Every rumor of a hidden vault, every locked-up tunnel entrance, every rusted piece of rail, fuels the possibility that the ghost train might still be somewhere beneath their feet. As time passes, the lines between fact and folklore blur, and what began as a whispered wartime secret is now as much about what we want to find as what's really there. It's tempting to focus on what the Nazis might have hidden underground, but sometimes the truth turns up in places you'd least expect. And when American troops stumbled into the Murkers salt mine just days after the Third Reich's collapse, they found that some legends weren't legends at all. They were stacked floor to ceiling in the dark. The Murkers Mine, a kingdom of gold beneath the earth. It wasn't just myths and rumors buried under Nazi Germany. Sometimes the truth gleamed brighter than any legend. In April 1945, as the Allies stormed into central Germany, a routine patrol stumbled onto the Murkers salt mine. Unaware they were about to walk into one of the most jaw-dropping treasure troves in modern history. Deep inside the tunnels, they found not just crates and boxes, but an entire underground kingdom of gold. Mountains of bars, stacks of currency, and priceless artwork filled the passageways. Every item a silent witness to the Third Reich's systematic plunder. The numbers defied imagination. More than 7,000 sacks packed with gold bars and coins, foreign currencies, jewels, and vast reserves of Reichsbank assets. Hidden in adjacent vaults, they found masterpieces stolen from museums and private collections across Europe, including paintings by the old masters, sculptures, and sacred artifacts. The sheer scale of the loot exposed the industrial efficiency with which the Nazis had stripped entire nations of their wealth. Gold teeth pulled from victims in the camps, family heirlooms seized at the border. Every ounce meticulously catalogued and moved underground as defeat closed in. For the American Monuments Men, whose mission was to recover stolen art, the Murkers find was a race against time. The Nazis, faced with inevitable loss, had started to destroy records and booby-trap the most valuable caches. But the Allies worked fast, preserving what they could, photographing every artifact for evidence in future war crimes trials. Generals and journalists alike toured the mine, their flashbulbs illuminating the staggering extent of the Nazi treasure hoard. Murkers became a symbol not just of what was taken, but of how deeply the regime's crimes reached into the private lives of millions. Of course, even a discovery as monumental as Murkers didn't answer every question. Where had the rest of the missing gold gone? How much was still hidden in forgotten bunkers or stashed away in secret bank accounts? The answers have kept treasure hunters, historians, and conspiracy theorists busy for decades. But as the mine was emptied and catalogued, one fact was impossible to ignore. Sometimes, the most terrifying finds are real not just in the rumors whispered above ground, but in the cold silence beneath it. If you thought Murkers was the end of Nazi Germany's toxic legacy, you might want to look beneath the waves, where a doomed submarine carried its own deadly secret straight into the deep. Nazi mercury at the bottom of the sea. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried. Off the coast of Norway, a chilling reminder of Nazi Germany's desperation still rests beneath the waves, quiet, invisible, and deadly. The story of submarine U-864 reads like something out of a thriller, except the consequences are still unfolding today. In early 1945, with the war all but lost, German engineers sent U-864 on a last-ditch mission to Japan. Its cargo? Advanced aircraft parts, secret blueprints, and 70 tons of liquid mercury packed into steel flasks, a gift to bolster Axis military technology, but one that would become a ticking environmental time bomb. The Allies were watching. British intelligence, having cracked Axis codes, sent HMS Venturer on an intercept course. What happened next was unprecedented. Two submarines hunting each other beneath the icy North Sea, locked in a slow-motion duel. HMS Venturer fired 4 torpedoes. The first 3 missed, but the fourth found its mark. U-864 was split open and sank instantly, taking her 73-man crew and her mercury payload to the ocean floor. For decades, U-864's wreck was just another sunken relic, undisturbed in the cold darkness. That changed in 2003 when a team of marine archaeologists discovered the broken hull. To their horror, tests revealed mercury was already leaking, poisoning thousands of square meters of seabed. The environmental threat was so severe that Norwegian authorities faced a terrible dilemma: attempt to raise the wreck and risk catastrophic release, or bury it deeper and hope the poison stayed contained. After years of debate and engineering, they entombed the site in a thick layer of sand and rock, a temporary fix for a problem that could haunt the North Sea for centuries. The U-864 story is a haunting reminder that not every Nazi secret is a legend. Some are catastrophes waiting to happen, hidden beneath the surface, their dangers unfolding long after the regime that created them has vanished. And if this submarine still threatens the present, just imagine what other wartime ghosts might be waiting to surface, especially those whose very existence is still debated. Because the next secret on our journey isn't just deadly, it might not even exist. Or does it? Let's follow the rails into the heart of a mystery that has tantalized treasure hunters for generations: the Nazi gold train that simply vanished. The first stealth plane, the haunting legacy of the Horten Ho-229. When it comes to Nazi technology, the stories tend to veer into the unbelievable: secret weapons, lost blueprints, and prototypes that sound more at home in a sci-fi blockbuster than on a World War II battlefield. But every so often, the legends are true. One of the most astonishing finds in the ruins of the Third Reich was the Horten Ho-229, a flying wing that decades later would look eerily familiar to anyone who's ever seen a stealth bomber on the news. Conceived by the visionary Horten brothers, this experimental jet-powered aircraft wasn't just fast. Its design was meant to evade radar, blending cutting-edge engineering with a desperate hope that some miracle technology might turn the tide of war. The Ho-229 was sleek, menacing, and almost otherworldly. its bat-like wings and minimalist frame a radical departure from anything the Allies had encountered. The Nazi regime poured resources into the project, gambling that stealth and speed could outmaneuver the relentless bombing raids that were tearing Germany apart. The first prototype lifted off in 1944, and for a moment, it seemed the impossible might be within reach. The Ho-229's test flights proved the concept was viable, even if reliability was still years away. Its dual jet engines and all-wing shape meant it could fly faster and farther than almost anything else in the German arsenal. But like so many of Hitler's wonder weapons, it arrived too late and in too few numbers to change the course of the war. When the Allies finally overran the manufacturing sites, they found a handful of prototypes and a mountain of drawings, just enough to prove the Nazis had been chasing something extraordinary. What's most unnerving about this find isn't the plane itself, but what it represented. The idea that a war-weary regime could come so close to reshaping modern aviation with a secret project hidden from the world. The captured Ho-229 was spirited away to the United States, where it would quietly influence the design of modern stealth bombers decades later. It's a chilling reminder that the shadows of Nazi science stretch far beyond the war's end, sometimes shaping the world in ways we're only now beginning to understand. And if you thought the Ho-229 was unsettling, the next Nazi creation takes us straight into the cold, nerve-rattling world of early missile warfare, a laboratory so advanced and secretive, its discoveries still echo in today's most dangerous technologies. Pinamunda's Missile Lab. Some places radiate a quiet dread, and Pinamunda is one of them. This remote Baltic outpost became the nerve center for Nazi Germany's most terrifying technological leaps. Under rocket pioneer Wernher von Braun, engineers and forced laborers here designed and built the V-1 Buzz bomb and the V-2 rocket, world-first missiles that rained destruction on Allied cities and forever changed warfare. Inside camouflaged hangars and secret labs, scientists worked round the clock, racing against time and Allied bombs. Their goal? A miracle weapon that might change the course of a losing war. The reality was horrifying. Thousands of prisoners, many from concentration camps, toiled under brutal conditions to assemble these weapons. When the Allies targeted Peenemünde in Operation Hydra, production simply shifted underground to places like Mittelbau-Dora, making life even worse for laborers. The V-1, with its menacing drone, terrorized London, while the V-2 struck without warning, supersonic, nearly unstoppable, and a grim preview of the modern missile age. After Germany fell, the scramble for Peenemunda's secrets became a Cold War arms race. Americans grabbed von Braun and his team. The Soviets took equipment and other engineers. In an odd twist of fate, these Nazi-born rockets would power both the moon landings and the nuclear arms race, leaving an unsettling legacy. The Peenemünde is both museum and warning, a place where the pursuit of advanced technology left scars on humanity. The cracked bunkers and silent rails whisper stories of brilliance and brutality, showing how easily ambition can cross into horror. Just when you think you've reached the limits of Nazi science, wait until you see what the regime left behind in its island fortresses, hidden strongholds still shadowing the English Channel. The Sleeping Giants. The Channel Islands, usually associated with peaceful beaches and quaint villages, hide a much darker legacy. Some of the most massive Nazi fortifications ever built on British soil. During World War II, Hitler poured vast resources into turning Jersey, Guernsey, and Alderney into a web of bunkers, tunnels, and artillery meant to make Allied invasion impossible. The island's scenic cliffs sprouted concrete towers, radar posts, and labyrinthine defenses, an extension of the infamous Atlantic Wall. The Nazis initially used local labor, but soon forced laborers from across occupied Europe, Jews, Soviet POWs, and political prisoners were shipped in. Under grueling, often deadly conditions, they dug tunnels, poured concrete, and built structures meant to last centuries. Hunger and brutality haunted every shift, and many prisoners never escaped the darkness. Inside these sleeping giants, German garrisons lived in relative safety, while civilians endured occupation and hardship. Some bunkers could withstand direct hits from Allied bombs, stocked with supplies to endure months of siege. But after France was liberated in 1944, the Channel Islands were cut off, left to starve and survive until Germany surrendered. The final months saw dwindling food, isolated soldiers, and a siege that ended only when peace was declared. Allied troops arrived in May 1945 to find an exhausted, isolated population and a network of fortifications that looked more like science fiction than wartime necessity. Over time, many of these structures have become museums or are slowly reclaimed by nature, but they remain haunting reminders of the occupation. What makes these ruins chilling is not just the concrete and steel, but the stories of collaboration, resistance, and survival embedded in their walls. And if Nazi ambition built fortresses in the cliffs, it also set its sights on wealth, launching a campaign of theft and expropriation that would leave scars far beyond the battlefield. The Frankfurt Vaults. When Allied troops swept into Frankfurt, they weren't just chasing the last vestiges of Hitler's armies. They were unearthing the staggering reality of a regime built on theft. Beneath the city's war-shattered streets, U.S. soldiers stumbled upon a chilling sight. Secret vaults and basements filled with valuables, from family jewelry to gold teeth and wedding rings, forcibly taken from Jews and others who vanished into the Nazi extermination machine. These vaults weren't isolated anomalies. The Nazis systematically seized anything of value: artwork, religious artifacts, personal keepsakes, and even gold fillings torn from the mouths of victims at concentration camps. The personal became the political, with entire inventories catalogued, boxed, and stashed beneath banks and abandoned swimming pools. In one notorious find, a drained city pool was discovered filled nearly to the brim with rings, watches, and even gold dental crowns, the spoils of a genocide turned industrial. What made these discoveries even more tragic was the impossible task of restitution. Many original owners had perished, families wiped from existence, their possessions stripped of context and history. Allied authorities tried to match names to objects, but with records deliberately destroyed or falsified, most of these treasures became unclaimed echoes of lives erased. Some of these items reside in museums or are held by organizations tasked with preserving the memory of Nazi victims. Yet the process of returning stolen property is still ongoing, tangled in bureaucracy and heartbreak. The silent vaults of Frankfurt remind us that for every tank or missile built, the Third Reich also waged a war on the identities and legacies of millions. And for some, the hope that a stolen heirloom might one day find its way home never truly fades. But as the Allies reclaimed cities, they also set their sights on Hitler's most spectacular mountain fortress, a place where luxury, paranoia, and propaganda collided above the clouds. Hitler's mountain fortress. High in the Bavarian Alps, perched atop the rocky Kelstein, stands a building that looks straight out of a villain's playbook, the Eagle's Nest. Ostensibly a tea house and retreat for Hitler's 50th birthday, this mountaintop chalet was a dazzling blend of alpine beauty and architectural bravado, more Bond villain lair than ordinary getaway. The journey up alone was a feat, an exclusive road carved into the mountain, a tunnel lined with cold stone, and an opulent brass elevator ascending 124 meters straight through the rock. Inside, guests, mostly Nazi elite, lounged in lavish rooms with panoramic views, while below, the war raged on. It was a strange, almost surreal contrast. Fine art, imported marble, and plush leather chairs overlooking the crumbling Reich. The Eagle's Nest was meant to symbolize Nazi power and permanence, a place where major decisions and propaganda shots were staged for the world. Yet, for all its grandeur, the Eagle's Nest never became the last bastion some imagined. When American troops arrived in 1945, they encountered no dramatic showdown. Instead, they wandered empty halls finding champagne, personal diaries, and the detritus of a regime that had fled. The sight was so intimidating that for a brief moment, Allied commanders worried about a final stand, but the mountain was surrendered without a shot. After the war, the U.S. military used the site, and later it was returned to Germany. Tourists flocked to the Eagle's Nest, riding the same golden elevator that once carried Hitler and his guests. The building stands as both a museum and a strange monument to delusions of grandeur. A reminder that even the most impregnable fortresses can become tourist attractions, and that the shadows of power rarely survive in the light for long. But below the peaks, deep in the mountain hearts, the Nazis hid something far more dangerous than marble and memories. The Heart's massive secret supplies. With Soviet forces closing in from the east and Allied bombers pounding from above, the Nazi high command knew the Reich was running out of time and space. Their solution? Move critical war production underground into the labyrinthine Harz Mountains. Here, beneath layers of rock, forced laborers dug miles of tunnels to house makeshift weapons factories, ammunition depots, and even entire railway lines. Life in these subterranean camps was a waking nightmare. Thousands of prisoners, many from concentration camps, lived and died carving out these hidden fortresses. The conditions were brutal, ventilation was poor, food was scarce, and the relentless pressure to meet production quotas led to widespread disease and death. Prisoners carried raw materials up the mountains, sometimes with only mules for assistance, turning the heart of the Hearts into a graveyard for the Reich's final hopes. When U.S. forces captured the area in April 1945, they found not just abandoned machinery and piles of unfinished weapons, but also plans to expand the production of V-1 and V-2 rockets in the mountains. The Allied teams also stumbled on evidence of war crimes, including mass executions of prisoners forced to work until collapse. To this day, the tunnels remain a haunting testament to both the desperation and the cold ingenuity of the Nazi regime. Occasionally, unexploded bombs and hazardous chemicals are still unearthed by local authorities. Nature is slowly reclaiming the scars, but for those who wander the Hearts, echoes of forced labor and unfinished war plans linger in the darkness. If you think the mountains marked the end of Nazi desperation, the next one plunges us into a world of secret tunnels and failed escape routes, a story with just as many unanswered questions. The frustrated tunnels of Thuringia. As the Allies advanced, Hitler's planners frantically mapped out a secret network beneath the forests and hills of Thuringia. Their vision was grandiose, an underground Berlin, where Nazi leadership could retreat, coordinate, and possibly regroup for a final stand. What materialized, however, was something closer to a fever dream of defeat. Half-finished tunnels, incomplete chambers, and hermetically sealed vaults that ended in dead ends or piles of rubble. The sheer scale of the project was staggering. Forced laborers dug out complex ventilation systems, bomb-resistant shelters, and even radiation-proof rooms. Some designs hinted at plans for missile research or secret weapons factories, but with little documentation surviving, historians still debate their true purpose. When American and Soviet troops arrived, they found a sprawling maze of corridors, some finished, others abandoned mid-construction. Heavy machinery, scattered blueprints, and unexplained rooms suggested ambitions that outpaced reality. After the occupation, the Allied forces stripped the tunnels of anything useful, then sealed or destroyed many entrances for safety. Later, local explorers and historians would discover remnants of construction materials and hints of future plans, but most of the secrets were buried with the regime. Even now, some entrances are off-limits, and the risk of collapse keeps many of Thuringia's wartime mysteries literally underground. Even the most ambitious bunkers can become silent tombs when built on a foundation of fear and failure. And yet, beneath the surface, the legacy of Nazi engineering would continue in the most notorious weapons factory of all. The extension of Mittelwerk, the infamous weapons factory of Mittelbau-Dora. In the Harz region, beneath the grim barracks and looming watchtowers of the Mittelbau-Dora concentration camp, the Nazis created a warren of tunnels that housed one of the war's most deadly production lines, the V2 rocket factory. This wasn't just an arms plant, it was a monument to industrialized suffering. Jewish prisoners and other forced laborers worked brutal, endless shifts amid choking dust, toxic chemicals, and lethal machinery, producing Hitler's vengeance weapons in near-total darkness. Conditions bordered on the inhuman. Food was scarce, medical care non-existent, and safety all but ignored. Prisoners slept in wooden bunks within the tunnels themselves, mere feet from rocket fuel and volatile explosives. Disease, exhaustion, and deliberate cruelty were constant. Historians estimate that over 20,000 people died within Mittelbau-Dora's tunnels, a toll that outstripped even the number of V2s ever launched. When U.S. troops arrived in April 1945, they found rows of half-assembled rockets, technical blueprints, and hastily abandoned equipment. Allied investigators shipped everything of value, including captured documents and vital rocket parts, back home for study. Mass graves found nearby spoke to the human cost of the Nazi rocket program. Parts of Mittelbau-Dora are preserved as a memorial. Visitors walk the same tunnels that saw both the birth of space-age rocketry and the darkest exploitation of forced labor. The site stands as an indictment of the regime's willingness to trade thousands of lives for the dream of ultimate victory. But as the Allies sifted through the remnants, they also uncovered plots that were as bizarre as they were desperate. Operation Burnhard and the flood of counterfeit pounds. Some Nazi plans were grandiose, others simply outlandish. Operation Burnhard sits squarely in the latter camp, a scheme to wage economic war on Britain by flooding its economy with millions of counterfeit banknotes. Spearheaded by German intelligence and staffed by an unlikely team of skilled forgers and concentration camp prisoners, the operation churned out phony British pounds so convincing that some made it into legitimate circulation. Hidden in the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, these reluctant counterfeiters worked under constant surveillance and threat of death, meticulously replicating everything from watermarks to serial numbers. By the war's end, millions of pounds worth of fake notes had been produced. Some were successfully laundered, others were dumped in lakes, burned, or hastily concealed as the Allies closed in. When the war ended, Allied investigators discovered caches of counterfeit currency and the printing equipment used to produce it. While the operation failed to cripple the British economy as planned, it stands as a strange and almost comical footnote to the more sinister Nazi plots. The recovered notes, printing plates, and administrative records became evidence in the broader effort to unravel the full scope of Nazi deception. And as the dust settled on counterfeit schemes, attention turned to the darkest, most infamous bunker of them all, the site of Hitler's last stand. The Führer bunker, Hitler's final resting place. Deep beneath the rubble-strewn streets of Berlin, the Führer bunker became the stage for the last tragic act of Nazi Germany. Built to serve as a temporary air raid shelter for Hitler and his closest confidants, it quickly transformed into the regime's final command post as the Allies closed in. By April 1945, the bunker was a claustrophobic warren of concrete rooms, echoing with defeat, paranoia, and despair. Inside, Hitler issued increasingly disconnected orders, as Soviet artillery rained down above. Key figures in the Nazi hierarchy, including Eva Braun, Joseph Goebbels, and other loyalists, crowded into the cramped corridors, making desperate plans as the world outside collapsed. The mood grew ever more surreal. On April 29th, Hitler married Eva Braun in a brief, somber ceremony. The next day, they both took their own lives, their bodies burned in the garden above to prevent capture. When Soviet troops finally stormed the bunker, they found chaos, scattered documents, hastily abandoned possessions, and the evidence of frantic attempts to erase every trace of the regime's crimes. Over the following decades, much of the bunker was demolished or sealed, buried beneath new apartment blocks and city streets. Only a modest plaque hints at its location today. The Führer bunker stands as the ultimate symbol of Nazi Germany's collapse, a place where megalomania, denial, and violence met their inevitable end. And yet, it remains a magnet for dark curiosity, a reminder that even the most evil secrets cannot remain hidden forever. In the end, the real terror of Nazi Germany isn't just what was buried, but what was unleashed into the world, ideas, weapons, and wounds that still haunt us. These discoveries are more than relics. They're reminders. If you're still curious about what's hidden beneath the surface, subscribe, share your theories below, and let's see what other secrets history still refuses to give up.